I knew there was something to it, that's why I had to ask. That's all.
All right, good morning. I will now call to order the Monday, November 18th, 2024 Town Council meeting. If you would, please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Up first on the agenda is the approval of the November 4th, 2024 Town Council meeting memoranda. A copy's been posted. Are there any questions from councilors? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
First from Vice President Burke.
Second.
The second from Councilor Sampson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is the approval of the November 18th, 2024 claims. Are there any questions from councilors?
Can I just make a comment, please?
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as I was kind of reviewing all these, I'm excited to see several things that are getting paid. A couple of those V3 companies limited doing engineering work on West Oak pathways. I think that's great. The Woolport report for the town planning, the mid-range town planning. Just seeing these things go out mean that we're getting stuff done, and it's really exciting for the future of Zionsville. And then one other thing I saw, sorry to take time for this, but it's important. You know, lots of municipal trainings are going on right now, and I think it's great to see that. And one of those people that I just want to call out, she's always here before we get here. She's always here after we get out of here. But Amy Lacey, I just want to say thank you. I see you're doing trainings. You're continuing to train. And I just, you're behind the scenes, but you're sitting up here at the diocese as well. And I just wanted to call that out and say I saw that as we were going through these numbers. And you're always doing a great job. And you're underappreciated because we don't really talk about you that much. So thank you. And just something I saw on the claims again, over and over again. So
thank you, Craig.
Thank you. That's all, sir.
All right. Any other comments or questions regarding claims? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve claims.
I go first from Councilor
Second.
Melton, second from Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is request to speak on agenda item. Amy, do we have any requests to speak?
No, we do not.
All right, then we will move along to the mayor administration update. And we have Mayor Stair with us this morning.
Morning, councilors.
Morning.
First thing we have on our list this morning is the SBOA audit results. We have talked the last few meetings about the SBOA audit of our finances for the past few years. And I'm going to repeat once again, the results were not ideal. However, the audit process has gone very smoothly. We thought the final report would take a couple of weeks after we filed our response, but that ended up taking just a couple of days, which tells me that there were no red flags in there. So the Cliff Notes version is that our books were out of compliance with state statute in 2021, mostly due to poorly performing software and a lack of adherence to internal controls. 2022 mirrored 2021. 2023 was a transition year, and our financial reporting improved significantly starting about mid-year through December. And you have the SBOA final audit report in your packets, and our finance director, Cindy Poore, is here to highlight some of the most important parts of that.
Good morning.
Morning.
As the mayor said, basically there were no surprises. It was not ideal, but it was nothing that we weren't anticipating. We were required to, well, we weren't required to. We had the option of writing a response to those findings, which we did. Since some of the findings were repetitive from the 21 audit, basically due to us still being in the same financial system at that point, we were required to write a corrective action plan, which was submitted along with the responses. And It was not hard to write because we already corrected everything. So, you know, we're definitely heading in the right direction. You know, we went through late '23 and early '24. We engaged with Baker Tilly and went through all of the internal controls. We rewrote those. And of course, that's a fluid document. Whenever we have a change in process or a new process, all of that has to be taken a look at and put into our internal controls as well. So that is a fluid document that we're always working on. You know, all of the financial policies that we went through and either created and or revised. But the three main things were the internal controls, the timely bank reconciliations, and the monthly engagement uploads, which is uploading the bank reconciliations and reports from the system. And here again, everything's current to date. Everything that they have addressed has been corrected at this point, and so just very positive moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And, you know, just so I know you all know this because we've been in contact about this, that, you know, this continues to be a focus of ours, which brings me to the next point, and that's the non-DLGF budget. By state statute, we need to present it to you by the end of the calendar year. You know, this basically, as you know, covers fee-based revenue as opposed to tax dollars. We are finalizing those numbers and posting public notice, and we will have that ready for you the first and second readings of December. The next item is Thanksgiving, which, as you know, is coming up next week, and that means Town Hall will be closed on November 28th and November 29th. And in the spirit of the upcoming holiday, I just want to say how thankful I am to live in Zionsville, to be in the position that I'm in, and honestly for the opportunity to work with all of you. I think that people should know that their representatives have their best interest at heart, and I truly believe that you all do. And I think with that as a starting point, if we put the people of Zionsville at the center of everything we do, only good things can come from that. So thank you very much for the last few months. Thank you for what I think we're going to be able to accomplish going forward, and I just want you to know that I'm very thankful to be in the position that I am today. And that is all I have. Any questions or anything I can help you with? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Are there any updates from counselors? All right, then we'll move along to old business. First item of old business is the consideration of an ordinance establishing the compensation to be paid to officials and employees for 2025. This is ordinance 2024-27. This is a final reading, and we have HR Director Joe Keel here if there are any questions from counselors. Are there any questions for Joe? I would make a motion to approve ordinance 2024-27 on final reading.
Second.
Second from Counselor Norris. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you. All right. Up next, we have a consideration of an ordinance establishing a police merit board. This is ordinance 2024-28. This is also a final reading. We have multiple folks here, Chief Spears and other folks, if there are any questions. If anyone would like to. All right, otherwise I would entertain a motion.
President Plunkett, one thing we'll
Yes.
need to note is that there were a few amendments in this ordinance as well as the next one. So one of the things we talked about at the last meeting was changing the establishment of a per diem from shall language to may language, and that has been corrected in both ordinances. There were also just a few grammatical changes that we made, nothing substantive. So as you make the motions, if you'll consider saying as amended, we'll pick up those additional revisions.
I would move to adopt ordinance 2024-28 as amended.
I have a first from Vice President Burke.
Second.
A second from Counselor Sampson. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Moving along to item C, consideration of an ordinance establishing a fire merit board. This is ordinance 2024-29. Chief Van Gorder is here if there are any questions from councilors.
And one item of note, as council has indicated, your legal counsel, the Shea to May modification. We also had two other clericals in the Exhibit A, which was the correction of some spelling of some names. Those are the only two changes in the ordinance as it comes before you.
I did appreciate you changing that to May, thank you. And so I move to approve ordinance 2024-29 with amendments.
I got a first from Councilor Sampson.
Second.
A second from, I believe that was Councilor McElderry. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a consideration of an ordinance authorizing bonds for the farm. This is ordinance 2024-31. We do have Heather James here, who is counsel for the petitioner. If there are any questions, I would just remind council, this is something that, as we talked about last time, was just the next step in this process for this particular project as previously negotiated from other council. So if there are questions, we have attorneys in the back.
I would move to approve ordinance 2024-31.
I got a first from Councilor McElderry.
Second.
A second from Councilor Melton. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. All right, moving on to new business. All right, first item up in new business is the approval of a 2025 public meeting schedule. Councilors, you'll note that, or I would just point out, every year we have Amy, who does an incredible job aligning school calendars, other breaks and such that take place. There's been a slight shift in our calendar as presented this year. I did speak with the administration on this as well, and I would point out that this is just our council meeting schedule. So other boards and commissions can certainly still continue to maintain their traditional schedule. But you'll notice that instead of shifting meetings from Mondays with holidays or Mondays that follow breaks, we've actually just decided to suspend those meetings. I think this is enough notice for folks to make the appropriate modifications for claims and anything else that may need to come on the agenda. But I just think it's something that we found shifting meetings from Mondays to Tuesdays when folks are used to having meetings on Mondays, run into work conflicts at times. And also, when we have meetings that follow a week-long break, oftentimes it's difficult to get through packets and make sure everybody's prepared. So, I'm happy to answer any questions. Other than that, this is a typical schedule where we would maintain the first Monday meeting at 7 p.m., third Monday morning at 7:30 a.m. here in Town Council Chambers.
I guess my only question would be is if we didn't have a meeting because of a conflict on a Monday, everything moves to the very next meeting?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Are there any comments or questions or concerns from councilors? Otherwise, I would make a motion to introduce, to approve the 2025 public meeting schedule.
Second.
A second from Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next on the agenda is the Zionsville School Corporation rezonings. We have Mike Dale, Director of Planning and Building, Matt Doublestein, Director of Operations for Zionsville School Corporation. The first item is a consideration of a rezoning ordinance for the Zionsville School Corporation, ordinance 2024-32. 1A, petition 2024-56-Z. All right, quite the mouthful there.
Good morning.
Morning.
At the October Plan Commission special meeting of the Plan Commission, in fact, the Plan Commission forwarded a favorable recommendation to the Town Council to rezone 16.5 acres from the town's rural and two-family residential zoning district, also known as R2, to the town's urban special use district, SU1. It received certification paperwork is attached to the submittal. The petitioners indicated they have no immediate plans for development of this property. It is an undeveloped 16.5 acre site, and the town's comprehensive plan recommended the area for estate conservation. But again, receiving a unanimous favorable recommendation from the Plan Commission. And I'll go ahead and invite the applicant to speak to you.
Good morning, Council. President Plunkett, thank you for considering our rezone requests. As stated by staff, the school district does not have development plans on these sites, so I would have the same comment for all of them. Our desire is simply to align, in some cases, the current use, and then in other cases, the current ownership with that school use, that special use 1 school use zoning classification, such that we are working with the same kinds of standards for development as we would move forward, or that we'd be signaling to our community the intention of the school district to continue holding on those properties. We do from time to time have developers request to talk with us about those, and should they desire to do that and our board wish to move forward, we believe it'd be a good, transparent process with our town to communicate that we see those as school properties and that those potential purchasers might need to come before you for a rezone in that case as well. But again, no desire to do any particular construction at this point on these parcels under consideration, just seeking that rezoning to align with use. Thank you.
So a quick question, what is the likelihood that these would ever be sold? Are they destined to be school properties at some point?
Our board and staff absolutely concurs with this approach. We believe that we are a growing school district. As we see other neighboring school districts that have grown for years and years, as we see them even start to lose students, we continue to grow, even as birth rates decline and other sorts that we are continuing to be a growing school district. We're grateful that many in the past bought land to allow us to expand for that growing enrollment, and we wish to pay that forward. We believe we're a growing school district, and we are not in a selling of real estate mode. We are in an we seek to acquire land to allow those folks 20, 30, 40 years from now to be able to steward this community in the way that we have.
So the advantage of changing the zoning to urban special use, even though you have no plans to develop it, why not wait until we're closer to a point of development? Especially with not necessarily this property, but the ones that are way out in rural area that we're changing from either ag or R1 or R2.
Yeah.
Just interested in knowing why now?
Well, especially as we've navigated this process and taken several months to navigate it, we would desire for our board to be able to be nimble enough to work within parameters that they'll actually be able to use to build school facilities. And such that those facilities can have similar sorts of design language with the design standards of that zoning classification. Those several months can save hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars for our taxpayers, depending on the particular season of a bid or a particular year of construction season. And so those are things we wish to take advantage of as well in being able to be a little more nimble in the process. But those are, again, decisions that the board would make in the future. We're just trying to set them up for that ability to be able to be thoughtful, to plan well, and to be nimble and stewards of the community's resources in that land holding.
Thank you.
I have a question. Coming from how it would affect us, does the school in this investment property being residential, does it pay property taxes at a residential rate?
Schools do not pay property
Okay,
taxes.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't know if on investment, if the zoning affected any sort of money exchange between
No.
us.
And again, at this point, the district doesn't believe they have any investment properties. They wouldn't classify any as investment. Certainly, they could be in the future if a board would choose to do so. But from a staff perspective, and as we've discussed with the board at this point, the intention is that the school would hold and use the property that they own.
Okay.
I like the idea of what you're doing. I think it stakes the claim, and then if there's any intent where there is an idea to sell to the developer, it's gonna come before us again, it's gonna get rezoned, and the public will know this is what's going on, and I think not no more, but I think it'll be just upfront. I really appreciate this. I think it cleans up things and it puts you in a zoning that you understand moving forward. So I'm appreciative of this process.
Did you get any pushback from the comprehensive plan point of view that we're working on? Jumping ahead and changing a zoning now versus waiting a year when that's all coming together as a new package?
Staff had recommended approval on each of our petitions. I think from my perspective and getting the chance to be personally a part of that to a degree, I think there's an amount of transparency that can lend itself to the comprehensive plan, such that folks can expect that these parcels, as identified for special use for school, could remain so, and it helps. This is my own perspective, but it helps see those surrounding areas and the neighborhood as more of a complete, what could be here in the future. For instance, one of the parcels, and I know that's not the first one here under your consideration, but the parcel where Union Elementary School currently sits, it is a school surrounded by residences. Had that been, and I don't know, I was a teacher at the time that it was built, but had that been identified for school use at the time, it may have lent itself to a more complete picture of how that development would have happened in the northeast corner. So again, that's pure speculation. I don't know that helps you with your question, but from my perspective as a citizen and working for our board, we hope that it's a helpful part of the comprehensive plan process for the community.
We just get a lot of pushback of why are we even doing a comprehensive plan if we're making all these changes before we get to that end of that road. So I just wanted to point out that your perspective is it's helping the comprehensive plan project. So thank you for that.
Madam, in reviewing all of these ordinances, I guess maybe this might help. I know we're going to have to read each one of them, obviously, into the record. However, maybe just from a public perception here, the reality is this land, the schools were built on property that were zoned something completely different than what perhaps they should have been, like the one in Stonegate, right? And then the one behind Stonegate, the property behind there. So this is just taking all these properties and aligning them with what the school should have had initially.
And in some cases, they were in another town
Right.
at the time.
Yeah.
So when they came into Zionsville, they resulted in the zoning that is currently on them.
Yeah, fair. Okay.
And President Plunkett, I think it's also important to point out that some of them do have schools already built on them,
Sure.
which makes
Yes.
complete sense. But others are just rural tracts of land, and that's why I was interested in knowing why change it now if in fact it could be sold at some point. We just have to change it back. So it is a good point, but a lot of them already have school properties on them.
Are there any other questions or comments from counselors? All right.
President Plunkett? Yeah. Mike Dale?
Sure, Mike.
Just for clarification, I apologize to the council and the audience. I was reading from the wrong notes. This is a 69-acre rezoning. It still received unanimous decision from the Plan Commission. As a condition of approval from the Plan Commission, they also recommended the recording of a voluntary commitment to where the applicant or the petitioner agrees to install a buffer yard pursuant to the BO standards, or the urban office, business office standards. So I wanted to make those clarifications for you. Thank you.
What does that entail when you install a buffer yard?
That would mean any future development or expansion of the site, they would conform to the town's landscape buffer yard requirements for the surrounding properties.
Okay. I didn't know if that was a defined amount of feet, yard, trees per,
It's definitely a defined quantity and location for trees and species.
Mr. Dale, that's not a requirement by the special use zoning. That's an addendum to
The OB zoning district,
OB or BO?
or BO, excuse me.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Matt or Mike? All right. Then I would make a motion to introduce ordinance 2024-32 with the agreed-upon commitments. I would make a motion to introduce that on first, or introduce that
Wait.
ordinance. Yes.
This is coming from the planning commission, so this will be.
So
final
it's
reading.
approval. Okay. So I would make a motion, I would withdraw that motion. Make a motion to approve ordinance 2024-32 with the
Second.
approved commitments.
Second.
Second from Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a consideration of a rezoning ordinance for the Zionsville School Corporation. This is ordinance 2024-33.
All right, again, the project at 7225 East 550 South received a unanimous favorable recommendation from the Plan Commission to rezone 4.98 acres from R1, which is the town's rural single-family residential zoning district, to the town's urban special use SU1 district, subject to the petitioner's commitment to install the urban buffer yard B for future development of the site.
Are there any questions for Mr. Dale? I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve ordinance 2024-33 with consideration of agreed upon commitments.
I have a first from Counselor Sampson,
Second.
a second from Counselor McElderry. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Heather, as we go through these, all these have these commitments. Do we need to read that into the, I did that initially and probably,
Probably, no.
Because they're
they
already
all-
in there.
Yeah, they're already
Okay.
in there.
Even though they say they're voluntary? Like, is this, we've had pushback on clawback for a lot of agreements we approve of, and then we have nothing in writing. Would that count as being in writing?
Yes,
Since they're
yeah, because they're
voluntary?
included,
Well, they're in the
included in the
packet.
document.
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to double check.
No, that's a good question.
perfect. That's a good point. All right, up next is a consideration of a rezoning ordinance for the Zionsville School Corporation, ordinance 2024-34.
Okay, and this item for property at 7312 West Stonegate received a unanimous favorable recommendation to rezone 13 acres from the town's R2 zoning district to the town's SU1 zoning district, again, subject to the voluntary commitment.
Any questions from counselors? I'd make a motion to approve ordinance 2024-34.
Second.
A second from Counselor Norris. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. All right, moving along, we have a consideration of a rezoning ordinance for Zionsville School Corporation, ordinance 2024-35.
This property located at 555 South Main Street received a unanimous favorable recommendation from the Plan Commission at last month's meeting to rezone 14.6 acres from the town's R1 single-family residential zoning district to the town's SU1 urban special use district, subject to a voluntary commitment to install the buffer yard B.
Any questions for Mr. Dale? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve on final reading ordinance 2024-35.
I got a first from Counselor
Second.
Norris, a second from Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a consideration of a rezoning ordinance for the Zionsville Community School Corporation, ordinance 2024-36.
This is a request by the Zionsville Community School Corporation to rezone approximately 33 acres at 5350 South 650 East from the town's R1 zoning district to the town's SU1 zoning district. This project received a unanimous favorable recommendation from the Plan Commission on October 28th, subject to the voluntary commitment to install a buffer yard B for future development.
Any questions for Mr. Dale? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve on final reading ordinance 2024-36.
First from Counselor Norris.
Second.
From Counselor Sampson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a consideration of a rezone ordinance for the Zionsville School Corporation, ordinance 2024-37.
This item, located at 1500 South 825 East, received a unanimous favorable recommendation from the Plan Commission on October 28th to rezone 16.5 acres from the town's single and two-family R2 zoning district to the town's urban special use SU1 zoning district, subject to a voluntary commitment to install a buffer yard B for future development.
Any questions for Mr. Dale? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve on final reading ordinance 2024-37.
The first from Counselor Norris,
Second.
the second from Counselor Sampson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Next item, the Plan Commission gave a unanimous favorable recommendation.
Hold on a second.
Yes.
Let me read this in here. real
Excuse me.
quick. Consideration of the ordinance, the Zionsville School Corporation Ordinance 2024-38. Sorry, go ahead.
Right, thank you. Again, this item received a unanimous favorable recommendation from the Town's Plan Commission on October 28th to rezone 16.53 acres at 11750 East 300 South from the town's rural single and two-family residential zoning district, also known as R2, to the town's urban special use district, SU1, subject to a voluntary commitment to install a buffer yard B for any future development on site.
Are there any questions for Mr. Dale?
Yeah, Mike, I guess it's a little late to ask this question, but I apologize.
That's right.
The buffer yard, is that required on the front and rear, all the way around? Or is it just against the road? I just noticed on the last one, there was a residential site kind of encompassed in it. My question is, when there's residential behind, is that buffer yard in the back too, or is it just on the front?
It's going to be along the backs wherever there is new future development.
Okay, thank you very much.
And this is Union Elementary, right? So it is, I think it's a fully developed site.
It is.
I don't
Yeah,
know
so,
what else could
so
be-
again, that commitment would only apply if they were to like to remodel or expand
Yeah,
in any way.
okay.
Any other questions from counselors? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve on final reading ordinance 2024-38.
I have a first from Counselor Norris.
Second.
A second from Counselor Sampson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next, consideration of a rezoning ordinance for the Zionsville School Corporation, ordinance 2024-39.
All right, and this item received a no recommendation from the Plan Commission at its October 28th meeting regarding the rezoning at 9275 East State Road 32 of 10.5 acres from the town's R1 zoning district to the town's SU1 district, subject to the voluntary commitment to install buffer yard B for future development.
Mike,
So as-
what's the rationale? What was the rationale for not recommending this to us?
I think in part, part of the site is located within the airport area strategic plan, which recommends estate conservation. And I think because of the size of the site, it wasn't clear whether, how or where that, or how that development, how that site would develop in the future. So it didn't appear to the Plan Commission to be obviously a developable site for school uses.
I would agree
As I
with that.
recall.
That's actually a pretty small area right off of 32, kind of near Carpenter.
It's right next to each other.
Yeah, so,
So they were torn about this, and they didn't know how to advise the town council.
So they did, just to clarify for the council, they just did not make a recommendation.
Right.
So I don't know if we've had that before.
I was
So
gonna
it
say,
was just-
I've-
And I guess I'm trying to figure out how to advise you on
Yeah.
moving forward, because typically we have a favorable recommendation or
Or
unfavorable.
unfavorable.
And then the town council simply has the option, because this is a rezone, to approve or deny, the recommendation of the plan commission. So
That was gonna be my, because the packet reads, the commission's determined by a vote of 6 in favor and 1 opposed to forward no recommend, so it's like
It is a no recommendation, without a recommendation, in other words. And that's the way the statute reads. It actually refers to no recommendation, so.
Oh.
Yeah, no, it is a little strange.
I don't think it's a bad
Can
I
we
don't
hear
think
from the
it's a thought.
school? Can we hear from the school?
Yeah,
Maybe
I think, Matt, I
Some
mean, if-
insight on what that property, is it for bus, like maybe a bus lot to be able to enter into
So-
Carpenter Nature Preserve? What
It
do we
is,
think?
it is currently a parking lot. I'll be honest with you that our thinking about this site was that Union Elementary School was on this site for 70 years, and we thought of it as Old Union Elementary School, and it, for us, was the same as all the other sites with schools on them already. We do not have a plan to develop it. It has a cell tower, so there's restrictions there. With the lease for that particular, it's another, I think we have another 50 years on that lease. Yes, indeed, with that one and with existing Union Elementary School, there are certain parameters that are required with their proximity to the airport. And that size of property is pretty small for the kinds of use that we can imagine at this point. However, with a lot of upcoming requirements for high school, certainly rural properties and the chances to get kids doing things in nature and doing things with work-based learning, we could imagine this as a useful, not only school purpose site, but we could imagine some possibilities for student use as well. The board does not have, neither has staff recommended or entertained any development ideas on these two parcels, this one site at all.
So Heather, I guess the question I have is if we take, historically, we receive a recommendation from the Plan Commission favorably or unfavorably, and if we don't take action, it falls back on the decision of the Plan Commission. I'm not opposed to this by any stretch, but I also think maybe this is a situation where we might wait until the school has something in mind to make a change. So would we, if that's the decision of the council, would we then vote this down and then do they have to come back, they got to wait a year, or would we just not take action? And since there was no recommendation, then
Nothing would happen.
there is no formal action, which means they could come back to us
I
at
think-
any point at that
I
point.
think that makes sense, or I guess you could also just adopt the recommendation, which is no recommendation.
So if we were to move to
I'm
accept the
looking- I'm looking-
recommendation,
Maybe John Overlander for an assist, but I'm thinking, we just have never had this before.
Good morning, Council. John Oberlander, Chief Legal Counsel. So this falls under a negative recommendation. If it's a negative or no recommendation, the council doesn't take action, it does not pass under Indiana code.
Or they could just, so it would fall under we're basically saying no. No recommendation
Correct.
equals a no.
Yeah, it would only take effect without action if it was a positive recommendation.
So if the council were to approve the recommendation of the Plan Commission, they'd basically be approving the defeat of this.
Yeah, I
proposed
think they'd have to
consensus
vote it up or
petition,
down.
And then you'd
Yeah.
have the year wait out time, or a
Correct.
compelling interest. Okay.
Yep.
so if we voted to support the recommendation of the Plan Commission, we would be voting this down.
Correct.
If we wanted the rezone to take place, we would not move to approve this ordinance, we would
You would deny the recommendation
deny
of
the
Plan
recommendation,
Commission.
which would then
Be a yes.
approve the rezone.
Yes,
Holy moly.
clear as mud. That's why I looked at John, I'm like, I feel like I need a backup plan.
I mean, I do think, I do appreciate what, Matt was saying about, obviously, the ability of the school to, have students off-site and experience nature, especially with the nature preserve up there. I also feel like this is not as pressing perhaps as the others, because this is something that didn't receive a favorable recommendation from the Plan Commission. I trust the Plan Commission. I certainly appreciate the work that they put in. And I see no downside with accepting their recommendation. I see no downside with allowing the rezone, other than just, maybe letting the school have some time to think through what they might really want to do with it and come back to us.
I agree, and I'd like to almost, having been intimately involved with everything that's happened to get us to this place with Carpenter, I'd almost like to see what transpires in the next year or so at Carpenter before, and again, I'm sure you would as well. Obviously, we don't know what's going to go there, but I would love for it to be consistent with what we're doing at Carpenter and enhance that whole parcel. So I would be okay adopting their recommendation, and then it would just, nothing changes, it just puts it on hold, and they could come back before us in a couple of years when we have a better sense of what they might like to do there.
I also think that it keeps the voice within what's currently going on, because if we say yes to the special use, it kind of makes it so the school could do what they wanted versus maybe the consideration and conversation that goes with what's currently happening in the Carpenter Nature Preserve, because we are marching forward with that. We do have a plan that's already happening in that area, and maybe the people that live up there have been very good at joining together and wanting their voice heard as well, and they might appreciate us slowing down this and not just going through the rote process of all things fit one size. So I would also suggest that we trust our plan commission and that we support and accept their recommendation to do nothing at this point in time.
Council, if I may, there are many school uses that are permitted in the current zoning. They are not the same standards as a school use, as the special use school use. And so I do want to point that out, that even a school building is allowed in this current classification, just not with the same standards. So again, for all of us, that involves more time if we were to try and do that. You are correct that with no imminent plan, with no plan discussed by the school board, this isn't something that's going to set back some plan that's in motion from their perspective. It does cause the schools some amount of difference in navigating how this site might be used in the future. Certainly they can do that, but I guess I wanted to offer that as well, that there are lots of uses under the current zoning that school could do without the same classifications and requirements of the SU1 zoning district.
President, could I ask one more question?
Sure.
And I'm not familiar, but could you explain to us what a cell tower does in terms of limitations of how the property could be used?
Well, what it does in terms of how the site can be
Could you
used.
put a school there with a cell tower immediately adjacent to it?
Yes, as far as I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or any other facility, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any restrictions relating to cell tower
Okay,
being on the
thank you.
property.
Just to clarify, unless I'm completely misunderstanding, the Plan Commission didn't say no. They said no recommendation. So they basically punted to us. So making a decision is not going against anything that the Plan Commission's desires were. Am I wrong on that?
Right, they're neutral.
They're neutral. So I guess I would throw out, if the school is making this request, unless there's a negative reason to grant it, why would we say no to the school at this point? But that's I just don't understand why we wouldn't, unless the Plan Commission was against it, which they would have voted, but they didn't. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't see a reason why.
What are some of these efficiency purposes, Matt, that you were talking about? That's where my hangup is.
Well, as we would work with staff, we'd need to learn more of the specific detail, but certain things like building heights, materials that need to face certain directions, we have committed to the buffer yard in this case as well, so that becomes clear. Those kinds of what is allowed under the ordinance from a materials and I guess design perspective help us work from the same kind of palette, I guess, the same design language throughout all the properties. Again, that's not something that we can't handle. It just gives us a little efficiency. Also, the amount of this period of time to seek the rezone, should the school district desire to build something that would be outside of the current zoning, that amount of time is useful for all the reasons I mentioned earlier, bid schedules, procurement, even, again, the cost of things that might be built there escalate. You all have been in the middle of construction projects before in this town. Costs escalate tremendously over short periods of time. So all of that is beneficial from the school district's perspective.
Would this be the only property then within the school district's jurisdiction that is not zoned special use?
In their current holdings, yes.
Okay, so as of, like, if we left here today without approving this would be the one parcel that doesn't uniformly conform with the rest of the district?
Yes. Unless I've missed something on the zoning map.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from council
I guess just, if we vote for, that is against the rezoning. And if we vote against, that is for the rezoning?
So I think another way, John and I were just figuring out how you might word this. So I think you could also just say that you want to vote in favor of the rezone, which would be approving the rezone. And then since there's no recommendations, you're not really voting up or down from the Plan Commission. I think that'd be cleaner, and then we know exactly what we're voting on, which was.
Perfect.
We're voting in favor of the rezone, or we're voting to deny the rezone.
Thank you, Heather.
All right, if there are no other comments, I would entertain a motion.
I'd like to vote in favor of ordinance 2024-39 to rezone said parcel.
I have a first from Counselor Melton.
Second.
Second from Counselor McElderry. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion.
Aye.
Motion passes 5 in favor, 2 opposed.
Thank you.
Just point of clarification, Council. The Plan Commission also, even though they did not give a recommendation, they advised a commitment to install the buffer yard B for future development, as they have with the other items. So,
And is that included in the petition already, or does that need, does the motion need to be amended?
that was included with the petition.
Okay.
Yes.
So Heather, how do we sign this?
In favor, and then Amy and I'll put a little note.
So those in favor would sign in favor,
Yep.
just like, okay.
We'll figure it out. We need to.
All right. Up next on the agenda is a consideration of an ordinance approving an American Rescue Plan Act as amended. This is ordinance 2024-40, and we have Mayor Stair here for this reading. Good morning.
Morning once again. What we have before you this morning is the final ARPA spending plan. This is an amendment to the plan that was passed by the previous council. All the money that was passed by the previous council has been used as allocated, but a few items came in under budget. So we were able to sweep together what was left over, and this is the amount we have, $167,751.97. And we have a plan to use this by the end of the year. As you know, if we don't allocate by the end of the year, we lose it. So this is basically the plan. It's on the screens in front of you there. $75,000 for a memorial sign outside of Town Hall along Oak Street. This is the construction drawing. Just to give you some perspective, we're looking at a sign that's about 6 feet high, 8 feet wide, that is, similar to what you see in other municipalities around here. This was part of the original plan when the town hall was constructed, and at the end of the town hall construction, there were a few things that were cut due to financial reasons. So this is kind of just kind of fulfilling the promise that existed in the original plan for the town hall building. And then for the other $92,751.97, we can put that in a contract for equipment that is due to be delivered to DPW next year, and that will free up a like amount in our general fund for pathway construction projects. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain them.
I have a question. So since I've returned home and lived here, we have changed the slogan of our town, and I see you putting the current slogan on the sign, and I'm wondering if that is the right move, or if it just should say Town Hall, because, I don't know, slogans change, and this is a lot of money, and I don't want to have to spend money on a new slogan if we change it again. I don't know, that's the kind of thing I've always thought with more permanent structures, is to not have something that's currently said on them.
There's no intention on my part to change the town slogan. That's one of the things you always consider when you change a town slogan. You have to get new stationery. You have to change the sign that's behind you, on the wall. So it's an expensive process to do that in any case. But I think, in order to be current, we should use the current slogan for the town and, just move forward in that way.
But to Sarah's point, it says Zionsville Town Hall behind us, not Zionsville for all the right reasons, so.
Well, I understand. A couple of years also, the pathway there with the trees, that was a new logo that we adopted, or that
Right,
the
that's
town
not the
council
point.
adopted.
I meant the words only, because it was for a visit or a lifetime, not that long ago.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been a couple of years.
Yeah,
maybe.
I would say that from an economic development perspective, one of the reasons we argued for Ray Hall was this is the right project at the right time in the right town for the right reasons. I mean, I think that was something that drew him to it. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with the slogan. I mean, I realize this is just a rendering, but I don't particularly have a problem with having it on there personally. But again, I know we're not approving the sign actual language as much
Right.
as we are the money for the sign. So,
I want you to continue if you,
no, I'm just, I'm good.
Sarah, may I? Or, yeah, so I have two questions. Primarily, location for the sign. I assume, I feel like it might be cart before the horse, putting a sign out there before maybe that lot develops. I don't know if the, if we have RDC stuff going on there, and is the location, you know, already, is it gonna conform to where we want it for the development, is the first question. Second question is, I see 4 squares, cubes on either side of the sign. Is that for future signage for that development as well? And I just can't really.
If you look at the lower right-hand corner of that graphic there, it shows some of the things that we would put on those, in those squares. Community meeting rooms, I believe, parking, trailhead for the Big 4 rail trail, and also restrooms, public restrooms.
Are those undecided? There's, because I see 6 signs and then 4 spaces.
Well, we have 4 spaces, and I guess, you know, those are concepts on the lower right-hand corner.
Okay.
Some 4 of that 6 would probably be the ones that we would put in. I mean, that's something we consider. As President Plunkett made the point, which I think is a good one, this is just a question of allocating the money and making sure that it's committed by the end of the year to build the sign. The details we can work out later.
Fair enough.
Any other questions for Mayor Stair?
How close is that estimate, 75 grand?
We believe that's pretty close. Where's Lance? Is he? You know, we've talked to the company that we're working with on this, and we think that's very close. And then, you know, if we're a little bit over, a little bit under, we can adjust what we're putting on the DPW vehicle contract
Awesome, perfect,
to make sure that it's all spent.
awesome, thank you.
Any other questions for Mayor Stair? I understand there is, obviously, because this is the ARPA spending plan, there's consideration of time here, right? We've got to have these things under contract and such. In speaking with Mayor Stair, if this is the will of the council to approve this, I believe you would like for us to suspend the rules and approve this today. Is that correct?
That would be preferable, yes. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from councilors? I would make a motion to introduce ordinance 2024-40.
Second.
Second from Councilor Norris. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Jason, is it 40 or 39?
40.
It's 40.
It is 40, okay.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you.
I will make a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
A second from Councilor Norris. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. And I will make a motion to approve ordinance 2024-40 on final reading.
Second.
A second from Councilor Sampson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. All right. Up next is the sewer rate study presentation, and we have Lance, Director of the Department of Public Works.
Good morning. I'd like to start off by introducing all the members of the team that are here this morning to speak on this matter. First, we have Jennifer Wilson from Crow, the town's accounting firm. We have Danny Stogsdill, wastewater division supervisor and the head of the utility and all its operations. In the back, Mindy Kleindienst is our administrative manager and essentially is the CFO of the utility. And way back, leaning against the wall, is George Lewis, our town engineer. And I want to take this moment to point out that before George came to us, when he was in the private sector, he was designing sewer plants and he was designing sewer collection systems. So his experience and contribution to this effort has been immeasurable. As has been noted, it's been 14 years since the town has contemplated adjusting its residential or its monthly sewer rates. I think that the philosophy, or perhaps the reluctance of past administrations, was just to avoid this at all costs because they're not pleasant. But you can only kick things so far down the road until you absolutely need to modernize your operations and pay for your expenses. And so here we are. Most experts, depending on who you ask, will tell you there should be about a 2 to 4 year period or window when you should look at your rate to try and avoid these large increases that go a decade and a half. Plus, when you step up a rate incrementally every 4 years or so, you're also realizing more revenue. Obviously, not only are costs increasing since 2010, right? Our employee costs, our supplies, materials, the things necessary to run the plant. You will see, or perhaps you have seen if you've looked ahead, that part of this rate is predicated on a $21.5 million capital improvement plan. Now, that improvement plan was not developed entirely in-house. That was predicated first on a late 2021 study by American Structure Point, which identified upwards of $50 million in necessary capital improvements and replacements at the plant. Then we took a look again in 2023 when Commonwealth Engineering prepared a preliminary design study for the plant. Sorry, this is way too much talking for not having talked much on a Monday morning. Apologize for that. That Commonwealth study then kind of drilled down to about $24.5 million in improvements and replacements and capital projects of the plant, about half of the structure point. And obviously, if you've seen or you will see, we are down to about $21.5 million in capital replacement program. Obviously, many of these, if some of you have toured the plant lately or recently, we hope you enjoyed that and saw the really cool operations there. And I'm going to reiterate something that was said probably in those tours, which is you're looking at some equipment that dates back to 1985. At the point when the town wisely decided it was going to manage its wastewater utility in lieu of its water utility. So we have a lot of equipment out there that is obsolete and nearly impossible to get replacement parts for. So by virtue of the implementation of this capital improvement plan over the next 10 years, we will increase the plant's dry weather capacity to 2.5 million gallons per day from its current 2.0 million gallons per day, or MGD. This was the target capacity identified in the American Structure Point report, which said when our sewer utility fully develops, we would need to be a 2.5 million gallon per day plant for dry weather flows. And probably more importantly, perhaps, is the increase in capacity from wet weather flows, which is currently 4.0 million gallons per day up to 7 million gallons per day. So at this point, I will yield the lectern to the professionals who are most closely familiar with both the finances of this effort as well as the operations, and we'll let Jennifer begin her presentation. At the end, we'll be happy to take any questions you may have, engage in any discussion, and subsequent actions then would be once a rate in concept is approved, we would bring before you an ordinance. And as with every ordinance, that is a two-step process, but perhaps a little different from the ordinances you're used to considering. The hearing is actually at the second ordinance, right? You introduce this, you're trying to get as much information out to the public as possible, as much time for them to react and for you to react as well. So we'll sit down and let Jennifer walk us through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. I'm Jennifer Wilson. I'm with Crow, and we've served as your rate consultant and municipal advisor to the sewage works. I believe you received this presentation in advance as well as the rate and financing report. So I'll go through this and just let me know if you want more detail or less detail. When we prepare the rate and financing report, we look back the past 3 years just to get a gauge of how your operations have been occurring. Then we make adjustments to the test year, and we've made adjustments to your 2025 budget. And then we pull together the revenue requirements, which include your operation and maintenance, your taxes, your current debt, and the proposed debt, which we'll be explaining here shortly, and funding the debt service reserve, and then funding capital with cash on hand as revenues come in during the year. As Mr. Lance talked about, you have a $21.5 million worth of capital improvement plan. That capital improvement plan includes the wastewater treatment upgrades for phase 1 and 2, wastewater major equipment replacement, and some various collection projects. As he also said, your last rate increase was in October of 2010. Your current rates, your current operating revenues support your operation and maintenance and the proposed 2025 adjustments, only with minimal amount of cash available for extensions or replacements, not considering your availability fees. Now, your availability fees come in as new residential or commercial entities come in and make those payments. You've had very good availability fees historically, but on a going forward basis, when we issue debt, we can't consider the historical availability fees since that can't be considered something that's reliable for the next 20 years while those bonds are outstanding. Your cash-funded extensions and replacements, we're going to build to $300,000 per year. As Mr. Lance says, we're proposing a rate increase. Your last increase was in 2010, and it was $44.50 for a flat rate residential. We're going to propose a 27.75% increase to $56.85. And just to give you a frame of reference, the CPI for the Midwest Urban has increased by 40% during that same time period. So you're still below what inflation says it could have gone to. This is a summary of your operation, receipts and disbursements with your debt service. So the blue line is your receipts, and the yellow line is your expenses during the past 3 years. As you can see, in each year, your revenues have exceeded your expenses. And so you had money available for cash-funded capital improvements. When we consider availability fees and interest income, it even increases even more. So again, looking back, you have had good revenues. You had availability fees come in, which you've either banked into your account to pay for future capital, or you're using it as that year goes along and using it on capital during that year. We made adjustments to the operating expenses for your budgeted 2025 that include increases for salaries and wages, other fees increasing, and we removed some prior period corrections. So we see that your budgeted 2025 is approximately $288,000 greater than your 2023 historical year that we looked at. I always like showing a pie graph of what your operating expenses are going for, and this is typical with utilities that about 50%, in your case 53%, is going towards salaries and wages, taxes, and benefits for those employees, with the remainder of the other 47% going towards other expenses. The funding plan for your capital improvement plan of $21.5 million is about $6 million going to be funded from availability fees that you currently have in the bank or you're expecting to get over the next 4 years. You have some 2019 bond funds still available, and those will go towards some projects. We're proposing a $6.8 million bond issuance in 2025. You have cash on hand of about 1.3, and then 4.7 to be determined in the final year of the 5-year capital improvement plan. We propose issuing debt. You currently have, you currently have about $800,000 worth of debt, and that's across a few bond issues, the 2010, 2015, 2019, and 2019 refunding. Some of that debt will roll off in the year 2030, but we're proposing that you issue debt for the 2025 will increase your debt up to $1,368,000. So when we pull all the factors together, we have the revenue requirements. You can see here operation and maintenance, we're expecting at $2.4 million. We have current debt service and proposed debt service and the debt service reserve funding, and then there's that $300,000 extensions and replacements. So again, when we consider your revenue requirements, we don't look at what the availability fees are coming in when we're proposing future rates. Your current rate is $44.50. We expect that to go to $56.85, which is a 27.75% increase. We did a rate survey of the surrounding areas of Zionsville, including many of the communities in Hamilton, Marion, and Hendricks County. Currently, you guys are the yellow mark over to the right, and that's 8 out of the 14 communities that we surveyed at $44.50. With this rate increase, you would move up to place 5 at $56.85, and you can see Indianapolis, Whitestown, Lawrence, and Pittsboro would still be above you. So I'll open up for questions at this point.
Just to confirm, the bond term is 20 years, is that what you're projecting
That
to
is
pay back?
correct, 20 years.
I guess a question I had, thinking about projecting out, both dry and wet, on your, I guess you'd had some studies done based on kind of population growth. And I forget the word terminology that Lance used, but it was kind of like when we're fully built, which to me seems really hard to project right now with everything that's, all the square footage in Zionsville. How far out is that projection, Lance, that we feel like this dry and wet capacity will cover us 10, 15, 20 years out? Just want to make sure we're investing long-term for what the actual capacity is going to be.
If I understand your question, then my answer would be, this looks at us how we would appear when we're fully built out, when we're fully grown up. So there would be, barring an expansion of our service territory, where we are starting to think about serving other areas that we haven't contemplated before, this would serve a full build-out. Now, when does all of Zionsville build out? And keep in mind, our sewer service territory, in rough numbers, or rough references, we got County Road 800 East kind of out there at the Hampshire, that's kind of our western boundary, kind of the 200/300 north, going up Michigan Road area, and then 421. So, when you think of all of Zionsville building out, you're talking decades and decades, but when you're looking at this core area, the pressure is there right now. So we want to make sure that this sets us up without having to do this again, certainly in my tenure, and hopefully, within the next 20 years or so, we won't have to contemplate this doing it without changing the underlying principles, which is the service territory for our utility.
Yeah, and that's the point I'm making. I do believe the service territory will continue to expand as we've continued to add lines beyond what you're currently servicing. Is that correct?
Well, our sewer service territory, by our account, was set in an adjudication with the, I believe with IDEM or the IURC, back when we had some discussions with Hamilton Southeastern to our north, with Trico to our east, and then with Whitestown to our west. So we have held, I think it was 2014, our sewer service territory was upheld in that adjudication. This is where you guys are going to serve. We've not moved those lines. Now, we have lots of areas within that we can extend physically our pipes, but until, the expansion of our sewer service territory is going to be a decision for this body or iterations in the future. But we're holding that sacrosanct for now.
So you feel very good about these projections and this cost to accommodate for many, many decades?
Many, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Lance, while you're there, just to clarify, I think we said this, but this does only accommodate our existing IURC, our location, our area. It doesn't include any expansion beyond. When I did the tour a few months ago, George Lucas was awesome in explaining all the things that are failing and all the things that are great, and things that we can expand on. We saw a map. That map inside your office had a clear line where we can serve two. And I think it's necessary to explain this aloud online here too. It doesn't talk about increasing that expansion. It's just what we have and trying to accommodate what we have and serve that, right?
Correct. We are targeting full service of our current.
This is not a development-driven expansion. This is just
No,
our
not at all.
area that we currently can serve
Correct.
legally.
And, it's I think it's important. It would be nice if you could say, this dollar gets us more capacity, and this dollar fixes a 40-year-old piece of equipment. But in this scenario, it is impossible to separate those costs out. And I think, maybe kind of an analogy is like your refrigerator has finally gone out, right? You got an old side-by-side, and you're like, I got to buy a new refrigerator. Well, I can buy the same make and model, replace what I have in capacity for X dollars. But for another $300, I can get a nice new drawer freezer, get that ice maker I've always wanted with a water filtration system, right? Now, you may have to make some tweaks to your home. You might have to isolate your power supply, maybe put a new water line in for that cool new ice maker. But this is the kind of the approach that we take. You've got to replace it, and replacing it with better and more efficient equipment is important, and it sort of organically gives you that capacity then to serve more customers.
The technology changes, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah, I mean, this is like trying to hook up your Atari, to a smart TV right now, right? They don't even make the connections anymore for some of these equipment to talk to each other.
yeah. Well, I appreciate, and I encourage anybody that hasn't on this council been on a tour of it, check it out, because it's an amazing process. There's lots of science behind it, and it's definitely something that needs to be updated. And it's not easy to consider a $10 or $12 increase at all for anybody, especially in these times. But touring that facility was very clear to me that since you say 1985, or when was that built?
So the first major plant upgrade was the mid-'80s, 1985, and then it was the early 2000s was the next major upgrade, which took us from the 1 MGD that was established in 1985 to our current 2 MGD rating.
Well, I like I said, I guess, seeing it makes me a believer of a necessity, but I'd like to engage any other counselors with questions as well.
Yeah, I'll build on that. So I'm fully supportive of the work that needs to be done, and thank you so much for what has been done to this point, the studies, everything that's gotten us to this. And the four-year plan, fully supportive as well. I guess what I worry about is a 27.75% increase in 1 year. Understanding that it's been since 2010 since we've had a rate increase, is there the possibility we could look at staggering that over 4 years, getting us to the exact same point, but having it such that the increases happen each year at a much lower rate? Because the vast majority of residents don't watch these meetings. They won't know. They're just going to get this bill and go, what the? So it would be great to be able to take that time to explain it and have those rate increases staggered over 4 years. Does that make sense?
It does, and many communities try to do that. Unfortunately, where you guys are standing right now, from the beginning discussion was your operating expenses are meeting your operating income and your current debt service with a little bit extra. So in order to issue new debt, we would need to have this rate increase put into effect. So there's not much opportunity to slightly phase it in unless you wanted to do it over a couple months period. But I also hear that sometimes is a little difficult for the billing office, that they do one rate increase and then right afterwards, 6 months later, another rate increase. So I see the time frame to phase it in is very short, and so it might not get you the benefit that you're looking for.
I see what you're saying. Let's make sure we explain that fully to the public.
Yeah, and to that same point, it's $150. So on one hand, it's like it's $150 a year increase. On the other hand, 27.75 sounds terrible, right? It just doesn't amount to much. But when you went, because we went through the slides, and by the way, great information, well presented. Thank you for that. The slides, because we went through them so fast, I'm assuming that they were built based on the approved rate increase. Because
Yes.
I thought there was a pretty substantial difference between the revenues and the expenses, but we kind of went through fast enough for me to not be able to crunch any numbers quickly.
It's on the approved rate increase, but the
Yeah, that
item
slide.
that really causes the issue is that your budgeted 2025 expenses are going up by what's the number here? $288,000. So your current, right now, in 2023, or at least last year in 2023, yes, you had some excess and you were able to throw off money to make capital improvements from cash, but 2024 increase to 2025 budget, that's what's reducing that margin, that you don't have any proposed excess starting next year.
Got it. Okay, so I guess where I was going to go before you said that was, were there any alternatives? Could we have bonded out at a higher amount with a little bit lesser of a tax increase to stair step in, as Tim pointed out? It sounds like that's probably not even possible because without the rate increase, we wouldn't be able to bond out at a high?
Correct,
the amount
correct.
we need?
Without a rate increase, you don't have the revenues in place to make the debt service and have that required coverage, which is paying for ongoing capital. Again, it's looking back that you have the availability funds that really assist you and the new customers coming on, but as we sit and at one point in time when we're issuing bonds to the market, they want to see that things are okay for 20 years, so we can't count on that availability fees or everything that you've kind of built up. What you have been able to do is that the wastewater treatment plant project is closer to $9.6 million, and you're using some of that cash that you have on hand from availability fees and that's been built up to reduce down that bond issue to more like 6.5. So you are using all your available resources to keep that bond issue as low as possible.
And so as additional availability comes online in the future, we can use that. I mean, I'm assuming it's either going to go into a reserve of some sort, or we can use that for debt service. Is that
Yes,
something we're able to do?
availability fees are available to make debt service payment according to your net revenues definition. And also those revenues, then we have that portion in the 5th year that we don't know how we're funding for it yet. So those additional revenues and additional availability fees will go towards fixing that idea in 4 years of how are you going to pay for that additional I think it's 4.7 million that's still unknown how you're going to pay for it.
Okay.
Wait, what's that 5th year unknown amount that we're signing up for that we don't know how to pay?
Right, it's projects to be funded by to be determined revenues of 4.7 million of this $21.5 million plan. You are increasing revenues each year. Your expenses are increasing as well as you bring on more customers, and you're also getting availability fees during that time period. So there is the wastewater treatment plant upgrade phase 2 that will be determined in year 5 that we have not determined how that's to be funded yet, as of yet.
With the availability fees coming on and not being counted in, is there some way to set it aside? Can we earmark availability? I don't know why I can't.
Yeah,
say the
availability
words,
fees have to be used towards increasing or on the treatment plant. That's the goal of the availability fee, is that it's supposed to increase capacity or make improvements to the treatment plant. Availability fee is what a residential or commercial customer pays in order to buy into the system.
Yeah,
And
I
so
know.
that's where it is already segregated into a fund that has to be used for capital.
So it's already untouchable for other expenses?
Right, it's not in your normal operating expenses. However, if you do get to that point where you aren't able to make debt service, I believe it can be used for debt service. You just can't count on it on a looking forward basis, but in a pinch, you can use those funds towards your debt service to make sure that the bondholders get paid.
I'm just at a point where I think about how, going door to door, people have told me their wallets are tight, and they've asked me to watch how their money is being spent. So it's hard for me to look at all the requests for increases. I mean, we've increased trash. But for me, it's just a consideration that I don't want us to not have a way to pay this in the 5th year and have to come back again with a 27% increase because, well, it's $150. That's $150 to someone who maybe doesn't have it. So, and knowing that there's going to be discussion on stormwater possibly soon after this, I just want to be mindful of the people who have asked me to watch increases that we make. And I guess I just wanted to make that point. Sometimes it's a give and take on, okay, I think all of us have been on a tour, and I did think they made a good representation of where we are. I could see we need to put work into our sewers and improvements, and definitely this is a needed request, so I don't take that lightly, but I do think there are a lot of people, to Tim's point, who don't watch these meetings, that just get the bill, that are getting frustrated by everything getting more expensive for them. So I just want to make sure that we are considering that fifth year even at year one so that we aren't behind the eight ball again?
Yes, and part of our, planning coming up to, for making a presentation to you, is that we're proposing flat rate or level debt in the 2025 bonds. And then in the year 2030, you do have some debt that rolls off. So you do free up about $200,000 in the year 2030. So as we get to the year 2028, have another study done, see where you are at that point, the new customers coming on, what availability fees have been available for those projects. But then you are opening up some bonding capacity for the year 2030 with the roll-off of that debt. So we are putting you in a good position to have flexibility that you may not need another rate increase for that next 4.7, but there's no guarantees of what happens in 5 years. So you would need to do a study, another study in four years to see where you stand at that point.
And how many houses do we have in Zionsville, but like the math-wise, what is the increase of this to our operating?
Yes,
budget?
that is shown on the revenue requirement. So we're increasing your revenues by almost $900,000. It's that deficit amount of $892,690 is the increased deficit that we're needing to build up in your operating revenues.
And so we're looking for an additional,
Almost $900,000.
I thought we said in 2030 it was 800,000 that was rolling off. You just said 200? Am I missing something?
It was in one of the slides, wasn't it?
Sorry. That might not have been considering the additional debt that we're taking on right now, that we're filling up some of that. I was looking at what the final debt service, if we issue these 2025 bonds and add those to that, we'll be closer at $1.2 million, but that includes $535,000 of new debt.
What bond is falling off in 2030?
2030 or 2015 bonds, which is about $67,000 per year. Your 2019 refunding bonds that refunded prior debt is falling off at $427,000 per year. But the 2019 bonds already had been wrapped around that, so that debt service also increases the following year. So it's some debt's rolling off, but then the 2019 bonds debt service is increasing.
I think we're all in favor of solving this dilemma, and we've known this is coming. Lance has presented to previous council that I had the opportunity to serve on. Now's the time. I mean, we have to do something. I guess the question I would have, and maybe for the mayor, we have a large reserve balance. It's always been my understanding, as thinking back the last 4 years, that eventually we would probably have to tap our reserve balance to help with this particular problem. I know you have a different plan in place for how we might spend some of those reserve balances, but why would we not consider spending some of the reserve balances and build that into thought process now to help pay for this gap that we're going to see, so we're not speculating, are we going to have another bond? Are we going to have to raise increases again? Why wouldn't we just plan for, this is a significant expenditure and investment in the community. I would think that maybe this might be something worthy to consider, and you don't have to answer the question, but it seems that there's some dollars available there that could easily make up that gap of $4 million.
I defer to some legal counsels in the room, but I believe it is not allowed for property taxes to prop up utility. So we could not use those property tax cash balances to prop up the utility. It has to be purely rate driven. And keep in mind too, we're going to get into a more dynamic cycle of the sewer rate. So the next thing we're going to look at in probably 2 years is the availability fee. And just to make sure everybody understands, the availability fee is that $4,000 per equivalent dwelling unit, per regular household equivalent for new construction. We're starting to lag behind our peers in that fee. So I guess to the point, I mentioned every 2 to 4 years, when you take a look at this rate. So before the 5-year horizon hits us, we're going to be looking at this rate probably twice. First time, the availability fee to make sure that that is wholly justified and accurate and responsible. And then before that 5-year horizon, we'll take a look at this fee. As Jennifer said, are we on track? Were we right with the projections? So I think we have a very solid approach built into this.
That would be very good rationale. Thank you, Lance.
When was the last time the availability fee was raised or?
I want to say
Adjusted?
2013, while Jennifer, Danny,
Because that seems more like
2013.
what we should be adjusting.
well, so the availability fee is entirely different from a monthly rate.
Right.
Okay, your availability fee is an establishment of a fair and equitable investment by new development in the system. And there's a couple ways to go at it. One of the more common one was, do you want to take over from here, or do you want me to start talking about depreciation and then a per gallon value to the system?
Right, right. So basically, what you're doing is valuing what your plant is right now, and you look at the capacity of the plant, and you determine how, you're determining utility plant and service as depreciated thus far, divided by the capacity at the plant. You're saying this is how much it costs for each resident, one ERU, to buy into the system. And so that's the general calculation. It's been set by manuals and historic, how you do it, but that's the general gist. But again, it's someone buying into your current system so that you have that money available to add additional capacity to your system, to make improvements to your wastewater treatment plant. So that's what the funds are there for them to buy in and for you to have the availability to replenish your system.
So there's no compulsory part of that equation that you could say we are reaching a tipping point, we have to have upgrades. It's based on what we already have, because it seems like as we add these larger numbers of neighborhoods to our established area, that is actually creating a tipping point where we do have to have, I know we were saying we can't do dollars to dollars for the old pipes versus the expansions, but it seems like it's creating some of the expansions
Yeah.
and therefore actually is a higher dollar.
Sorry, and I did give you only half the equation. You can look at it both ways. The one way I described is like historical, looking back. There's also of how much more will it cost to expand your capacity by so much. And you can say this is our estimated cost of what it's going to cost divided by capacity. So it's usually a merging of those two methods.
Is it illegal to jump to the expansion equation since we're at that point that's causing us?
It will be a mixture of those. It could, or it can be a mixture of those. You can use that alternative method as well. George has much experience, and so he's been taking over that calculation. So I'll let him provide that to you at the proper time.
Would there be would there be a way to, you said availability funds don't feed into this
You can't look at it.
ability to pay back.
Correct, right. So you can, when you get to the year, when the bonds are stolen next year, we look at year-end 2024, you have to look at that, and you say, yeah, availability fees were there to make, it helps with your cash flow if those funds need to be available for debt service, so your coverage is going to be high because you are an increasing size community. But bondholders want to look at, well, can you pay for my bonds 15 years from now? And so you can't project and say, yes, we're going to have that money. So we can look, on a looking back basis, your coverage looks great, but on a looking forward basis, we can't include that in our analysis. Though it does play a factor when the rating agency looks at you, but we can't say that we are going to have the revenues to make that payment in 15 years based on your current availability fees, because anyhow, that's just not how it's done. You can't use availability fees as part of your going forward coverage.
Right. And when I looked at where we fall in with other local municipalities, you know, we're jumping from one of the lower ones to one of the higher ones. Is that because that was our number? Is that is absolutely needed, or is that just, okay, we're not at the top, so let's go here, like what?
No, that was actually just, we pulled together all your revenue requirements, and saw where you fell, and this is where you ended up.
I have one more question. Lance, this may be you, I don't know. The 4.7 million, and it says that project to be funded by TBD. I know that's the shortfall that we're talking about in, what, year 5? Is there a phase of work that can be pushed so that if that funding is not available, we may be looking at a refi or another bond issuance, I guess? But do we have a fallback safety mechanism in case the funding just isn't there? Or is this we're moving forward and we're gonna figure it out later? I'm just trying to figure out.
Well, it is the latter, and keep in mind, you know, we generally forecast 180 to 200 new EDUs per year, equivalent dwelling units, so that whether that's houses or commercial factors thereof, it doesn't matter, seems to historically track fairly accurately with that. When we take a look at this availability fee, there's a couple of things that we'll take a look at. You know, hopefully once we secure this debt and we've got our future moving forward solidly, we take a look at this availability fee. Right now, commercial properties, commercial developments are charged one full 4,000 EDU for their initial, and then they're given a 50% credit for all those thereafter. And that was kind of an administrative decision back in the day. There's really nothing supporting that. That was an effort to be development friendly to those commercial applications who are going to have to pay for multiple EDUs. And also, you know, we kind of talk about, you know, new development driving this, but remember, for those who are on the council, a past iteration, we had 2 major projects that was about $1.5 million, if I recall, that extended sewers into existing homes that were struggling, homes that absolutely needed sewer. I spent time in their backyards, and it was completely untenable. So we have a population segment out there as these existing homes, as we expand our facility, they are going to need these services. So it's not necessarily just new development that's driving some demand. It's everybody out there who's going to want to tap into our system. And of course, it's probably negligible, but you know, you see a lot in the village, people buying the old 2-bedroom, 1.5, you know, craftsman home and turning it into a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom home. You know, we have a lot of aggrandizing of existing homes too. Larger families can live in homes that originally weren't planned that way. So there's a lot of growth going on other than just we got a new rooftop going up here.
Do we have for those people that you spoke about that are currently on their own sewage system, when that fails, do we have a county rule that makes them have to hook to sewers, or is that not in our county?
So it's not a county regulation, it's a state regulation. It's basically Barrett-type law, and that states that, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if we extend sewers to within 300 feet of a residence, you can legally obligate them to connect. However, the town has never taken that position. We've extended sewers in the old areas, so it's there for your availability when you need it. We're not going to mandate it. We're not going to make you spend money that you don't have to. So I suppose in the most egregious instances, if the county came in and condemned a septic system and sewers were available, that would be a compulsory connection. But it's never been driven by the town as far as proximity goes and our ability to mandate connections in that manner.
Okay. I'm done asking questions.
Are there any other questions from councilors?
I guess Lance, you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation that you were doing this now to be able to collect feedback prior to it coming to a vote. How are you planning to do that? You know, beyond the people that might be watching this meeting, is there any type of outreach to get people's opinions?
So this is not a matter of opinion. This is a matter of data. How much can the rate be flexed? You talked about, some of the questions you asked were the first ones I asked too. Why can't we tap the availability fee? I learned from Jennifer, why not? What if we do a rollout over 1, 2, or 3 years? And obviously, we cannot, that delays our debt, that delays our revenue, that delays us being able to start to implement these necessary improvements. So feedback, if you have feedback, send it our way. We're going to proceed with what we think is the proper and necessary fee changes to the utility to keep it solvent and plan for our future. If you wanted to have real discussions on deferring the capital program by deferring debt, by phasing in a rate, I'd ask that the council, you come up with a person that might speak for the council, maybe work with the mayor to have these meetings, because I think that would probably really be an exercise in better understanding the solid nature of this and the lack of flexibility in the rate. But we're certainly ready to continue, have any dialogue, answer any questions, discuss anything you may want, but we're going to bring this rate forward where we think it needs to be right now.
Thank you.
So then, Lance, I guess the question would be, you mentioned, and I know you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier as well, specific timeline. If this is something that you got approval for or support from the council, your next step is?
We would have Mr. Oberlander draft an ordinance, working with Ms. Harris, that would be presented to you, that would include the new rate. It's basically an ordinance, and as I said, it would be introduced at your first reading, and you would have the hearing at the second meeting.
But did you have a month in mind for
We
that?
would advance this in the most timely manner, meaning potentially at your next meeting, you would see an ordinance. You, of course, can be the master of your agenda. I would ask that you give it consideration when it is presented.
Okay, yeah, I certainly appreciate the presentation. We've sat through a number of these in the past, not this particular type, but a number of different presentations about wastewater and sewer, and obviously understanding the work that's been done to bring sewer to a lot of these folks in town in areas that you would never even imagine don't have access to sewer. And then obviously the work along Oak Street. So there's a lot that goes into this, so I appreciate your consideration. Are there other municipalities that would layer in like an inflationary component to this? Like you mentioned, we haven't done this in 14 years. Mm-hmm. Are there municipalities that just tie an inflationary component to the ordinance, or no?
I don't know that in a utility rate you can do that. Certainly you have that latitude in some contractual relationships. Can a sewer do it? I don't know. Do you know, Jennifer? I would rather we do this every 3-4 years as a gut check rather than just assume we're going to, we might be fine. Our plan is to be fine in 4 years. So I don't know about that.
So Indiana code basically says you need to do it the way that we presented here, that you have revenue requirements set out, that you're setting out the public, what the revenue requirements are, and then you're adjusting your rates therefore, or how that looks. Sorry, talking attorney language there. But however, I do know other communities have done that, but it hasn't been subject to any lawsuit yet, but I guess my gut feel is that someday it might.
Yeah. In the ordinance, as it will be written, is there a way to build in a required revisit every 4 years, a requirement, so that we're not in a spot where we're looking at this in 10 years, or new administration comes in and says, we don't want to take a look at this right now? Like, is there a way to require we review that every 4 years?
Yeah, you would just put that as a caveat within your rate ordinance that says we want to look at it biannually or every so often. I have seen that in other ordinances for other communities. And thus, it just means that we come in and take a look and make a report to the council at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think if that's allowed, I'd like to have some type of language in there that requires, maybe it's not every 4 years, but every 2 years, to your point, or something, whatever is standard, perhaps.
Yeah, and we've got other instances in Zionsville code, like the road impact fee, and that we could use as a model for revisiting every, cycle, so that you would do it 4 years out so that it would be ready on the 5-year mark for a refresh if needed.
Unlike, say, an impact fee, which mandates revisiting every 5 years or taking steps to update, what would be the penalty if we didn't do it in 4 years? Would we just not get revenue? I mean, as a gut check to us, you have my plan to be at this every 2, 3, 4 years, but if you have a sunset clause, what happens if you don't do it in 4 years?
I think what President Plunkett is saying is not a sunset clause like we have on the impact fees, but just simply putting language in that creates a process for consistent review and renewal.
Our intent.
Right. So if you didn't
the
have a
approach is-
recommendation, then you wouldn't have any update. You'd stay at your current rate.
Yeah,
But just a process to
Yeah,
make
like you're
sure we
giving
don't
this
forget to do it.
presentation, you're giving us this presentation because in the email that I saw was kind of like, hey, we need to do this. We haven't done this in a long time.
Right.
We need to have this presentation. We need to make sure this council's aware. We need to make sure the public's aware. What I'm saying is in that ordinance, can we build in a rate survey or whatever your, this presentation is required to be submitted to the council every 4 years? Again, not necessarily to roll back anything, but
No,
just to,
yeah.
so that we're not 14 years down the road having this conversation again.
Yeah, I get what you're going from. I was just trying to get a flavor of, what the language would say, what it would commit to, and what, if any, penalties would happen if you did not meet the ordinance. Fire me,
Well-
I guess, I don't know.
And there is a cost to this level.
Yes, absolutely.
Presentation, so maybe it doesn't even have to be as deep as this, but the rate survey definitely helps put people's rate increases in perspective. So maybe not even having to be so extensive, but not making
Yeah.
us the council who has to raise all the rates because for the past 12 years, nobody has.
That's a good point. And I,
We'll,
and I think, I
I'm
think
really
the
trying to
reality is that there have been some ignored growing pains with this town, and unfortunately, I think we're just gonna end up being the council that's gonna have to sift and winnow through what some of those increases are gonna be, or not be, but.
I'd rather it be on the view of the public of being responsible versus being egregious and taking money from you.
No, that's fair. Lance, how would you like feedback presented to you from this council?
If you would like to send it to the mayor and to me, we can filter it to the appropriate parties and appropriate actions.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Are there any other matters from councilors? Otherwise, I would make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second from Counselor Norris. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. The next regular town council meeting is scheduled for Monday, December 2nd, 2024, at 7 p.m. in the Zionsville Town Hall Council Chambers. Final notice will be posted in compliance with the Indiana Open Door Law. Thank you. Have a great Thanksgiving.